Please be seated. The chamber will again seize the floor to the prosecution to continue putting questions to these witnesses. The combined time for the prosecution and the lead co-lawyers is for one session. That is, it will conclude by the short break this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, I'd now like to turn to your release from Kreng Tachan prison. In your interview D25/24 at page 0016-3458 in Khmer, 0022-3453 in English, and 0017-8092, you give the following description of Tamok releasing you from Kreng Tachan prison. And what you say is, quote, "He went to Kreng Tachan to get me. He went with Tachim. They rode a CL motorcycle. He did not enter, just called out for Chen and said, 'That doctor, where is he? Feed him.' They fed me, and he went south. When he returned, he took me with him." End quote. So my first question, and if you could please answer as briefly as you can, who was the person named Tachim who came to Kreng Tachan with Tamok?
After I left Kreng Tachan prison, I learned that Tachim was District 108 committee. They used the number for Tram Kok at the time.
Thank you, sir. And again, as briefly as you can, where did Tamok take you when he came and had you released from Kreng Tachan?
He took me through a hospital, 22K, which was a zone hospital.
Thank you. And did Tamok ever explain to you how he was able to release you from Kreng Tachan prison?
I didn't know the actual reason, and Tamok needed me the most. That's why he went to get me, because there was a machine from equipment from Kampong Speu, and they couldn't work on it. It's a radiography machine, so he needed me to work on that medical equipment.
Other than Tamok, did you see any other Khmer Rouge leaders during your time at Kreng Tachan? And if so, whom did you see?
I didn't know, nor heard of that name. However, one day, it's around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw people moving around near the entrance to where I was detained, and they talked about the Tajir. However, I was about 80 meters away, and I was rather young. I could see that person, but I did not know for sure who Tachir was, because there were a number of men by the name of Chir. Even at the Hospital 22K, there was another person by the name of Chir who returned from Hanoi. At that time, they referred to that man as Ta Chi, and the word Ta was used during the Khmer Rouge regime to refer to people with a senior or higher position.
I think you just told us how far you were away from that person when you saw him, but I didn't quite understand. Can you tell us what the distance was between you and that person when you saw him?
The Chia didn't come through the prison cells. He was near the office of the senior cadres. And from where I was detained to where he was standing, it was about between 70 to 80 meters.
And you also mentioned the name Tachia. How did you come to associate the name Tachia with that particular person?
One district cadre who was also detained at Krang Tachan said that that man was Tachir. So I presumed that he was a senior cadre of the Khmer Rouge. That was my own conclusion.
In your statement at E35153, Khmer page 0017-2044, English 0020-5090, and French 0020-5094. You describe a different occasion during the Democratic Kampuchea regime when you saw Nguyen Chia give a speech. Can you tell us whether he was introduced by name at the time that he gave that speech?
The chair made a speech, but it was not at Krang Tachan. I was detained at Krang Tachan in 1975, and that was around mid-March and continued till early April. And after I left Krang Tachan, I was not allowed to return to my house. I was further evacuated to an area about 20 kilometers away from my house. They then gathered the 18 April people, not the 17 April people from Phnom Penh. So they gathered up those people to watch a circus performance in Takao province. And I'd like to elaborate a little bit further on this event. The circus performers were Chinese. There was a female performer who was stacked up higher with other people support on a single wheel. There were 11 of them all together. From the figure of the man who made a speech, it actually assembled Tachir that I saw at the Krang Tachan. What I can recall is that Cambodia is an agricultural country, but we will transform it. And I don't actually understand much about what he said. From an he will transform into an agri-industrial country. I checked up the word and I understood the meaning, and then I was happy. So after I was released from Krantachan, then I was happy that Cambodia would be transformed. President interrupts. Mr. Witness, please respond only within the limit of the question that is asked to you.
Okay, now I'd like to turn your attention to events after your release from Krang Taichan, shortly after your release from Krang Taichan. In your statement E3/5153 at page 0017-2044 in Khmer, 0020-5090 in English, and 0020-5095 in French, you were asked whether you saw any Khmer Rouge leaders after 17 April 1975, when the evacuees from Phnom Penh were arriving in Tram Kok district. And this is what you said. Quote, I saw Tamok at Wat Champa near my house in Mahosina village. I don't know about the others. I know that 70% of the incoming evacuees at the Wat Champa Center were killed at Krang Taichan, Krabai Prai, Office 160, and at Office 204, called A Conduit, end quote. So my first question, very briefly, how far was Wat Champa from your house at that time, April 1975?
From the pagoda fence, it was just a road dividing my house and the fence of the pagoda, so the distance is approximately 20 meters.
And can you tell the court what the pagoda was used for when the evacuees from Phnom Penh and other cities arrived in Tram Kok district after 17 April 1975?
Wat Champa Pagoda was turned into the Khmer Rouge office, and they raised pigs on the temple. As for the monks' residences, they housed children there, and there was a supervisor for each group of those children, and those children did not attend any schooling there.
And did you personally see the evacuees arriving at Wat Champa?
Yes, I did.
Can you give us an estimate of how many evacuees you saw arriving at Wat Champa?
When people were evacuated from Phnom Penh to Champa Pagoda, I was still being detained at Krang Taichan. It was my 11th or 12th days in detention, and some of those evacuees also were sent to Krang Taichan. And only after I was released from Krang Taichan to return to my house in the village, there were still some evacuees living in that Champa Pagoda. And from what I saw, I could see there were still thousands of evacuees living in that pagoda.
You mentioned that you saw Tam Mok at Wat Champa. What was he doing when you saw him there?
When I saw Tamok, I didn't dare go into that area where the 17 April people lived. I was standing from my house, that is outside the pagoda, and I saw him making some gesture, pointing here and there, but I couldn't hear what he said. I only saw his gesture from my house.
You mentioned him gesturing and speaking. Could you see who he was gesturing and speaking to?
President, Mr. Witness, please wait, and Counsel Kong Sam On, you have the floor. Kong Sam On. Thank you, Mr. President, and I object to this question. It is a kind of questions that tries to draw a conclusion from this witness, as he stated clearly he couldn't hear what Tamok was saying. So it is not proper for this kind of question, President. The objection by the defense counsel is sustained, as it leads to him making a presumption. And Mr. Witness, you are reminded not to, you don't need to respond to the last question.
You said you didn't dare go into the area where the 17 April people were. Why didn't you dare to go into that area?
We were told by the best people that whoever involved or had relatives living amongst those people, they were considered having connection with the enemy. So they actually cut off any relationship with siblings or with family relatives. We were not allowed to have any contact with the 17 April people or the 18 April people.
In the OCIJ statement that I just quoted, you said that many of the evacuees gathered at Wat Champa were killed, and you identified 4 sites at which these evacuees were killed: Krang Tachan, Krabai Prai, Office 160, and Office 204. We're familiar with Krang Tachan, but I want to ask you about the other 3 sites you mentioned. Can you first very briefly tell us where or what Krabai Prai was, and again, as briefly as you're able to?
Krabai Prai was located in Samraung commune, and it was in Krabai Prai village.
And what was Office 160, and where was it located?
Mr. President, Mr. Witness, please wait until you see the light on the tip of the microphone. Witness, Office 160 was located at the current Prai Kduj commune, Trapang Up village, and Trapang Kronyung commune.
And what about Office 204? Where was that, and where was it located?
Office 204 was located in Osarai commune, but I cannot recall the village name.
And how do you know that evacuees were killed at those sites?
After the liberation in 1979, I became the commune chief there was no chief for Prekadu, Tropeng, Kronyun, or Osarai. So I had to go and work in those communes. And I saw skeleton remains of people who had been executed at Office 204 or Office 160 or Prekadu or at the Krang Tachan. However, the only difference was that the people were buried at Krang Tachan's office. And in fact, I participated with other people in trying to bury some of those bodies who were exposed. And some of them had been eaten by wild dogs near the base of the mountain.
Thank you, sir. I'd now like to ask you about another topic from the period from 1975 to 1979. In your 2008 interview, which is E3/5153, at page 0017-2044 in Khmer, 0020-5089 in English, and 0020-5094 in French, you were asked about meeting Ta Mok during the period from 1975 until 1979. And this is what you said. Quote, I met Ta Mok frequently. He came to the village where I lived, and I also met him at the work sites, and I met him in Barai too, end quote. Now I'd like to ask you to focus specifically on the work sites where you saw Ta Mok. And my first question is, what kind of work sites were these where you saw Ta Mok during the period from 1975 to 1979?
I'd like to respond briefly through your question, but it would be difficult for you to understand. But if I respond in details, it will take your time. At the work sites, I was no longer allowed to be a medic. However, sometimes I was called to Takai province to ask, for example, what that specific medical equipment was used for, or what that medicine was used for. And at work sites, I was instructed to drive a tractor towing a water pump. And sometimes I was used to be together with some repairmen to work on light in order to provide lighting to the work site for people to work at night.
You've mentioned a water pump, but can you tell us what was being done at these work sites? Were people growing rice? Were they building canals? Were they building dams? Or were they doing something else?
People there were having a very difficult time, and I believe everywhere in the country the situation was the same under the Khmer Rouge control. They worked non-stop. As for younger children and their parents, the parents had to work, and old women were assigned to look after 10 to 15 young children each. They worked in the rice fields for all year around, dry and wet seasons. As for me, I was assigned to work with the 20 youth, that is to provide water into 20 rice fields. And I had to be on mobile constantly to check which rice field needed water. So I had to irrigate those rice fields as well as to repair any broken pump. I was I had skills in medicine, but you can imagine the difficulty for me to be assigned as a repairman for those water pumps.
Now, you mentioned having seen Ta Mok at some of these work sites. Can you tell me what Ta Mok was doing when you saw him at these work sites?
Thank you for asking this question. I really, in fact, praised Ta Mok. Ta Mok was a person of great interest. He went into work sites, canal work sites, but he dressed in a way that people didn't recognize him as Ta Mok. He actually went to ask from a unit chief, us carrying a basket and a soda pole. And he also observed that the unit chief did not work, so he used a pole to beat up that unit chief and asked him to work, and he told the unit chief that he had to work as other workers too.
When he beat this unit chief, did he then identify himself as Ta Mok at that time?
Some people recognize him, although he didn't present himself as a Ta Mok.
Did you ever speak to him at any of these work sites? And if so, what was your conversation?
From the time that I was evacuated, I didn't have a one-on-one conversation with him. However, he used to advise me that I was an intellectual, a petty bourgeoisie, and that I had to get rid of that social status and put myself in the position of a poor peasant farmer status, so that I could prove that I could be tempered to work with them. Otherwise, I would be sent for refashion or re-education again.
Do you recall where and when Ta Mok told you these things?
Yes, I do. He told me when I arrived at the national office that is at the sector hospital. The day he left the pagoda, that is after he dealt with the 17 April people, he came to my house. He asked about the health of my mother, and he told me that we should not stay in that house and that we should stay further. The further, the better. So after those 17 April people left the pagoda, we moved to Barai commune in District 108, that is to the north of the Takai province, which is currently called Roka Krau district.
Thank you, sir. The last subject I'd like to address concerns the period after January 1979, when you had become the chief of Tapem commune and a number of graves were exhumed at the Kreng Taichan site. In interview D25/24 at page 0016, 3462 in Khmer, 00223457 in English, and page 00178095 in French. You were asked how many bodies were exhumed, and you provided the following response. You said, quote, 8 pits, 10,045 persons from the actual count of skulls, but there were many other pits which had not yet been dug up. And then continuing a bit later, After the stupa was built, I counted again and found 10,011, end quote. Now my first question relates to these 8 pits. Where were these 8 pits located in relation to the Kreng Tachan prison?
Witness, thank you for your question. I will try to respond to release my misery experience from Kreng Tachan for 29 days. The scene when I was there, it was not only the 17 April people, it was not only the 18 March people, and not only the enemies. Those who were followers of the Khmer Rouge were also ending up there, including the French people, the German people, the Buddhist monks, and also royal families. Reverend Stephen was one of the leading monks. I saw the French people, one of the French victims. I spoke to him a few words right after the 17 April people.
For interrupting you, but my question was actually quite specifically about the exhumations. In 1979, when you were participating in these exhumations, you mentioned the exhumation of 8 pits in which there were 10,045 bodies found. And I'm interested in the location of these 8 pits compared to the Kreng Tachan prison. How close to or far away from the Kreng Tachan prison were those 8 pits that you participated in the exhumation of?
Witness, yes. President, hold on, witness. Counsel, you may proceed. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not objecting to the question, but I note that the witness reads from his note, and he also may be ticking on his papers. President, yes, I review the paper from him this morning. It is just a blank piece of paper. It's just his way of responding things. So, prosecutor, you may proceed. Please repeat your last question so that the witness can remember.
My question was about, very specifically, these 8 pits that you participated in the exhumation of in 1979, from which more than 10,000 bodies were recovered. And I'm interested in the location of the pits. How close to or far away from Kreng Tachan prison were they?
Witness, yes, in Kreng Tachan office, it was 250 meter long and 200 meter wide. Those pits were not far away from the center. It was on the southern part of the fence and other in the eastern area in the paddy field. We did not excavate all the pits. During the 25 days when I was detained, I was ordered to dig the pits, so I could identify, and I did the excavation those 8 pits, and we did the actual count of skull, but there was no skull from the small children. At the time, Oxfam did not recognize it was the skull of human being. Ce n'est pas de l'homme. They said they are not human remains. They were skull or bones from cattle. Unless we can prove, we can show them human skull, and then Oxfam representative recognized it was the human remain. And we would store the human remain next to the pits, and we appreciate Oxfam at that time who support people who did the digging with rice ration. And based on our actual count, the 12,132 skulls. 2 weeks later, when I arrived there, the human remains, the skull, were scattering, and the villager told me that dogs and other animals took them away. President, witness, please be reminded that time is very short for you, so please be brief in your response to the question.
And sir, apologies for interrupting you. I just have a couple more questions. My first one, the 8 pits that you exhumed in 1979, was that the same location or a different location than where you had been ordered to take bodies when you were a prisoner at Kreng Taichen?
Respond, not all the pits. In some places, the prisoners who were detained there, and Khao Samat, who was one of the prisoners later, told me that there were other pits, and later we could identify the place where the pits is. And when we dug out, we could find skull and human remains. And we request Oxfam for a small construction, and then we did a count, and we found 12,000 skull. And after that, we transferred the skull and human remain to the stupa, but the skull were not the same as the first time we found them. Co-prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. My last question, you've referred to an actual count of skulls, and I think you mentioned a number of over 12,000. Can you tell me who it was that physically counted these skulls and came up with that number of something over 12,000?
Witness, could you please repeat your question?
Yes, I'm interested in who it was that actually counted the skulls. Who were the people that counted the skulls and came up with this number of something in excess of 12,000?
So translation seems to be incorrect. So the number is 12,000. It's not 10,000. So please check again on the interpretation.
Mr. Witness, could you please tell us again what was the total number of skulls that were counted in the course of these exhumations?
President, witness, please hold on. Upon our excavation, so we store a skull next to the pits. So the total skull was 12,132. After removing from those pits to store in the wooden house to avoid any disturbing, and then there was only 12,012 skulls. So those skulls that lost were not taken away by dogs or pigs, but they were relatives of the victim who pray and saying that if among these victims is my husband or my daughter, if I touch any skull, it would be that skull, and then those people took away for the ritual or festival, and later we transported to store in the stupa, and then the skull getting lesser than this number.
And my last question is, who was it who actually counted these skulls?
Witness, those who did that, other people, including the chief monk of Nikrut Rangsei, who did the counting, and I also did the counting, and he also participating in the digging out, and one of the monks is still Reverend Kam Sok in Tramkok district, who participated in the counting of the skull and storing those human remains.
Mr. Keo Chandra, thank you for answering my questions. Mr. President, I have no further questions.
The President, Mr. Prosecutor, you conclude your line of questioning, and now the Chamber give the floor to the lead co-lawyer to put question to this witness.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, witness. My name is Marie Giraud. I am the international lawyer representing the consolidated group of civil parties. I have just one question to put to you regarding the statement you gave this afternoon. I would like you to explain a term you used a while ago. You said that there were the people of the 17th April or the 18th of April or the 18th of March. Can you tell us what those categories of people consisted of? You have the 17th of April, 18th of April, and the 17th of March translated differently. Can you tell us whether you were talking of the 17th of April or the 18th of March people?
Witness, yes. The 17th April people were those who still live in Lonol regime, Cheng Heng, who evacuated on the 17th April. But those who were called the 18th April people were those who live with the Khmer Rouge in their liberated zone before the 17th April liberation by the
Donc, est-ce que les...
So, were the 18th April people the base people?
Response. The assumption by the local people, they call the 18 April people. So all who were there with the Khmer Rouge liberated zone were called the 18 April people. It was an idiom used by the liberated zone, so they were the base people.
Juste pour être sûr de...
In order to be absolutely sure that I have properly understood your testimony, the base people were not people from the commune in which you lived, but there were people who came from elsewhere. Is that exactly what you're saying?
Response. Yes, the 18 April people were those who were not living during the Lon Nol regime. So those who were liberated by the Khmer Rouge outside of the provincial town, but they belong to the Khmer Rouge before the liberation by the Khmer Rouge of Phnom Penh. But those who transferred to the place after 17 April 1975 were called 17 April people.
Merci, Monsieur le témoin. Juste pour...
Thank you, witness. In order to be more certain that I've properly understood you, can you explain to the chamber whether the people of the 17th of April were treated differently from the people of the 18th of April, or the April 18 people?
Witness, counsel, please repeat your question because I did not catch your question. President, lead co-counsel, could you reframe your question because it seemed to me that the witness is confusing with your last question. Could you repeat your question and reframe it if possible?
Bien sûr, Monsieur le Président.
Of course, Mr. President. My question, Mr. Witness, is as follows. Are the 17 April people who are treated differently from the 18 April people? Were they treated differently in terms of the food that they were given, the kind of work they had to do? Was there a difference between the 17 April people and the 18 April people in terms of the treatment that was meted out to them?
Response. It was understood by the Khmer Rouge that they received education with them since 1970 until certain period of time, whereas the 17 April people were those who moved to the place, to the community after 17 April 1975. They didn't attend any education, any training, or live with them earlier. President, the question is like this. What was the treatment by the leaders or the society towards the 18 April people and the 17 April people in 1975? Was there any difference in the treatment about food ration, about work, condition of work, and so on? Witness, yes. The 17 April people was perceived as knowing too little about the liberated zone, whereas the 18 April people were the one who stay in those areas since 1970, more than 8 years. So the 17 April spent only 3 years and 8 months only. So, President, Counsel for lead co-lawyer, could you make your question more simpler and shorter so that the witness can understand and respond well to your question?
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have just one last question for the witness, and I hope you would understand my question, witness. Were the 17 April people treated any differently from the 18 April people? Were the 18 April people treated any more differently than those who had already been there since the very beginning?
Witness, under their regulation, people should receive the same food, the same labor, but the trust in them were different. There were less trust in the 17 April people because they consider them having some remnant, some ideology from Colonial regime. But I observed that those who were in the 18 April people would be assigned to be the group chief or unit chief. But the 17 April people did not get a chance to be appointed as group chief or unit chief at all.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le témoin.
Thank you, witness. Thank you, Mr. President. I have no further questions for the witness.
The President, thank you, Counsel. Now the Chamber will give the floor to the Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia to get an opportunity to put question to this witness. Counsel, you may proceed.
So, group.
Defense Counsels, good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors, and the witness. I will ask you a number of questions. So I would like to know which was the exact date of your arrest, witness? Response: when I was arrested, it was on the 20th of March, and I was released by the end of April. It was from late March and part of early April 1975. Counsel, thank you. I would like to quote from your statement. Did you give your statement to the Office of the Co-Investigating Judge on the 24th October 2007? Witness, could you repeat your question, Counsel? Counsel, I want to ask you in your interview for the co-investigating judge on the 24th of October 2007. Did you give this interview on this date? The President, witness, please hold on. Witness, what recorded on the statement, you can see my thumbprint or signature on them. Counsel, thank you. I would like to quote your response D25/24 0016 34 65 English 0022 24 52. Question: when were you arrested? You said between 1973 1974, before the liberation all across the country. Is this your question to the co-investigating judge? Response: yes, this response is not correct. Defense counsel: yes, thank you. I just would like to know the short question because in the interest of time, the President, please hold on. Witness, all answers on the record with my signature and thumbprint are all correct, but it has been several years and many years. If you compare to my response here, might be something not identical. Counsel, but you said in this statement that you were arrested in 1973 or 1974 before the liberation by the Khmer Rouge. Is it correct that you responded that?
Answer: I don't have the interview with me now. And in fact, I reviewed some of my statements, and in this case, that response is not correct. Counsel, that's all we want from you, and I'll move to another question. I'd like to ask you in regard to your detention. After you were arrested, you were sent straight away to Krantajan, or were you sent elsewhere? Answer: I was sent to Krabai Prey office, and I was detained there for 5 days. It was not a prison, it was an area called Krabai Prey. However, for people who were identified as committed real offenses, they would be executed immediately. As for those who needed to be further interrogated, they were sent to Krantajan. And I only saw one person, Ajahn Chen, who was the interrogator at Krabai Prey. Questioned: when you were sent to that office, was there anyone else arrested and sent along with you? Answer: yes. There were 4 of us. Ye Tat from Tapena commune, but a different village, and Tapan from Tamom village, both deceased, and Ye Hrund, who was executed at Krabai Prey. Thank you, says the counsel. Questioned: how long were you detained at the Krantajan office? President: Mr. Witness, please observe the microphone's light. Witness: my apology, I tend to forget that. The combined time of my detention of 24 days at Krantajan and 5 days at Krabai Prey amounts to 29 days in detention. Thank you, says the counsel. Questioned: when were you released from that detention office? Answer: please repeat your question. Question. I want to know, you were detained at the detention center, and when were you released? Answer. I cannot recall the day, but it was in April, that is after the country fell, probably 11 or 12 days after the country fell in April. Thank you. Question. I'd like to extract your statement before the OCIJ, that is the 25/24, ERN 00163461, English 0022343456. Question. When were you released from prison? Answer. It was the country almost fell in 1975. Which one of the answer is correct? Answer. No, it was not near the time the country fell. Counsel. Which is, my question to you is, was that your true response? Answer. As I stated, all my responses would bear my signature. Counsel. So you stand by your statements before the OCIJ? Answer. Of course, I was never interviewed by anybody else except professional investigators from the ECCC, and before I signed on those statements, I read them and checked for accuracy. Thank you. Question. In Krang Tachan office, how many detention rooms or cells? Answer. While I was detained there, as I stated, it was a long building, as I replied earlier. But later on, when I went to exhume the pit, I saw some solo part. Counsel interrupts. Maybe you misunderstand my question. My question to you is, how many detention buildings were there at the Krang Tachan? President, Mr. Witness, please try to observe the light on the tip of the microphone before you respond. Witness, there was only one building where people were detained. Counsel, I thank you. Please be brief because we are running out of time. I move to another question. After 1979, when you went to exhume the pit, how many buildings did you see within the prison compound at the time? Answer. When I went for exhumation, there was no building left. There were forests. Even that building during the Khmer Rouge regime, it was decayed, and some villagers came to disassemble the building and use it as firewood. Thank you. Question. When you arrived at the prison compound or Krang Tachan office, was it surrounded by a fence? Answer. There was no fence at all. During the Khmer Rouge regime, it was well known as a prison without a wall, and as I stated, there was only one building where prisoners were detained, which was 3 by 20 meters, and they used barbed wires to surround that building. Questioned. Outside the prison compound, there was no fence at all, and there were only barbed wires used along the wall of that building. What was the walls of the building made of? Answer. The walls were made from coconut tree leaves. However, they used barbed wire to surround the building. 2 or 3 layers of barbed wires were used. Question. Was there a place where they interrogated the prisoners? Answer. As I stated this morning, there was a small building to the west of that building. It was on the ground. It was built directly on the ground. It was roofed with thatch, and also the wall was made of thatch. All prisoners who were sent to be interrogated would sit on the ground, and the interrogator would sit on a wooden chair. Question. At that interrogation place, was there like a proper door, or was there no door that people could see through? Answer. They use coconut tree leaves as walls, although we could see through parts of it. And when I went there, I could see parts of the tree leaves, coconut tree leaves, were decayed. And as I stated during the Khmer Rouge prisons, there was a prison without wall. I thank you for your response, and I don't have any further question for you, and I'd like to cede the floor to my colleague. President, thank you, Counsel, and Mr. Witness. The time is appropriate for a short break. We will break now and return at 3 p.m. Court officer, please assist the witness during the break and have him returned to the courtroom when the session resumes at 3 p.m. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ